how do you come from the worst of the worst systems, and communism is pretty damn bad, and then you come to a place like America, or any of the Five Eyes, right? Or, and you just make it, right? And so many entrepreneurs, especially down here in South Florida, everyone that was been on your podcast here and beyond, I know them. I've known them for years. They're all entrepreneurs, very successful, extremely well known, and they all came from nothing. They all came from the same goddamn garbage system that
I
we
think
are. Kids and we were broke, the farthest we can go is to Rocky Point. It's the closest, beach from Phoenix, and so you just go 3 hours down to the beach.
so. That's where's that exactly?
Rocky Point is Puerto Peñasco in Mexico, and so
Oh,
it's
yes.
Baja California, but it's on the inside of the Gulf, and so
So a couple of hours.
I think 3 hours in Phoenix, and so that's all we could afford, right? Just some 99-cent street tacos and cheap motel lodging, but on the water, on the beach. So
Was that an American dream, and is it somehow changed over years?
I don't know. I don't think that exists anymore. I don't. It's odd to me. I watch a lot of podcasts about people surrendering their U.S. passports and leaving the U.S. because the taxes are too high, and like my brain can't fathom that. They're like, "Oh, the American dream is dead," right? I'm like, it was never the American dream. It was the immigrants' dream, right? And I think it was a misnomer. That was an American dream, right? When you're born as an American, I don't know what that's like, but being a U.S. citizen, naturalized U.S. citizen, I believe that we've got the best rights in the world. And so the American dream isn't it's the immigrant's dream to live the freedom of an American, right? And I think it's underrated. And I can't fathom these people who are like, I need to save some money in taxes. Let me give up my passport. I'm like, what? What are you talking? Like, my brain still can't get over oh, it's not the country, it's the people. I'm like, well, you are the people, especially the immigrants, the first generation Americans, as the podcast is, right? The amount of pride of what we get here is different. So I don't think the American dream is dead. I think it's just been reformulated. I think it's now the immigrants' turn, and the immigrants' dream is much different than the third generation. I have a lot of friends I grew up with that are fourth generation, fifth generation Americans, and their family wealth, generational wealth, has translated pretty well into them being proud of the American dream that their immigrant great-great-grandparents reached. Now we're that generation. Most of us here, and obviously in your podcast that I've seen, we've reached the pinnacle of a dream, which is freedom, the ultimate freedom, right? And so people go, "You're not free in America," but you don't know what that really feels like until you live in America. And I think it's hard for people to grasp. So I don't think the American dream is dead. I think the immigrant dream is more alive than the American dream, right? And I think if you're born in America, and all things equal, you still have to have a drive to succeed in America, right? So I don't think it's a dream. I think that's a perception.
And also the immigrants' children, they kind of lose it a little bit, like the parents, like first generation, whatever comes here, first generation immigrants, Americans, they come here, they're like hungry. Even their kids can be hungry, but like I think that thing gets lost over like second generation or third. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting watching my kids, right? And so I've got an older son and a younger daughter and a baby on the way. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them. But I think if you see your parents fighting for you and you see some of these things, I haven't seen, or at least I don't know many third or fourth generation Americans, Serbian Americans, obviously, but I don't know too many wealthy Eastern European families whose kids have gone astray at second or third or fourth generation.
That's good because
So I think it's a cultural thing, right? I have a few amazing Cuban American friends who are now third generation Cuban American, second generation, and then they tell me the same thing, right? Their parents gave them the necessary cultural, tangible feel of how to retain that stuff. I think where you see majority of that is people who are 10th generation, 12th generation, where it's lost, the cultural identity is gone. But as long as my parents are alive, they're going to be like, save your pennies, right? They do this and invest this. And I think that drivel that we call drivel, right, as first generation Americans ends up being a mantra of living. And that is the only thing I want to pass on to my kids. Now they're going to interpret that and do something radically different with their life, and hopefully it'll be much better than me having gone through, first 10 years of hell in America. But the hope and the dream is that they have an easier life without losing the advantage of having become American citizens, right? And being the second generation Americans.
How
right?
viable is the advice from your parents? People get older and you kind of lose your grip on things. You think differently, and things are changing, especially the last 20, 30 years, extremely fast.
I think it depends on where your parents, how they grew up. We had this conversation before the podcast started, I don't think. But it's interesting because particularly my parents were both super educated and had positions that back in former Yugoslavia, Serbia, were considered pretty high-end, connected to some of the bigger government and private entities. And so they traveled a lot. And, we, as kids, we grew up in Greece and Italy and Trieste and Katerini, and, we up and down the ex-Yugoslavian coast, Dalmatian coast. And I think because they were well-traveled, multiple languages spoken in the house, my mom grew up with ambassadors' children. My grandfather was one of the first private transporting companies, ex-Yugoslavia under Tito. So she grew up around Sveti Sava Cathedral and grew up in ambassadors' children's, neighborhoods and kids that were well-versed and I think it depends on the parents, right? Their advice to this day, God bless that they're still alive, healthy, and kicking, is very valid. Now, it's annoying, and they're going to be watching this, so hi to Johan and Dragana. But, it gets annoying because I've heard it for so long, but I don't think it's lost any validity, right? At least my parents. I don't mean this I'm not going to generalize for other Serbian Americans or first-generation Americans, but my particular parents seem to give really good advice.
So at least it's those basic core things. I think what I've learned, some things that I'm getting older, I'm just remembering some stuff, just things. Let's say, for example, I remember always, like, when I'm leaving my house, you bring your wallet, you bring your keys, you bring your phone, whatever it was at that time. And even today, I never forget my keys, phone, and my wallet.
I can't tell you that maybe from a technical standpoint, because they didn't really understand American systems for at least the first.
Can't even blame them. They were
used to a different system. Besides the technical erroneous mistakes that I had to fix on their behalf, I don't think the advice was anything less than sound. Right, the family advice, the money advice. I don't think it could be applied evenly, but what came out of their know-how, I don't think it was wrong. And matter of fact, since I was a child, I always told my parents, like, you guys are right? Here's where you're right, here's where you're wrong. But I feel like that ex-Yugoslavian parents and Eastern European parents in general, there really isn't a lot of bad advice because it's a lot of common sense advice, and it's so closely tied to our cultural and religious rights. And so when I say rights, I mean rights, not rights, So when you have cultural and religious rights that are tied to your linguistic capabilities, and that carries on generation after generation, it would be foolish to think you know better. But the problem is that people don't often escape and they don't evolve that system. Because remember, they came from a much different system that, God willing, no one ever has to go through again, right? Communism being a bastard of the world for the last 100 years, right? Or 70 or 80 years. But they had applied that logic in that system, right? And so we from here see the fallacy of the system back home because it's still a lot of those remnants. Whereas the capitalism in America gives that perspective a completely different skew. And so for those of us immigrants, we take that erroneous skew. If we just tilted 20 degrees to the right, we can then develop successful businesses. Because I thought about this on the last podcast they did back in Serbia about a month ago. And I was like, why is that so many ex-Yugoslavian, Eastern European immigrants in general go out and open their own businesses? It's not I don't want to have a boss. That's not really a core drive. But the ability to take those old systems that you had to function under while you're being stepped on at every level to evolve and to be your own human, then you come to a place where it doesn't really do that to you. It does in some aspects because, the United States. But if you can just adapt that system and take the learned lessons and apply them in the U.S. system, all of a sudden you have the jump-off points that are so significant in establishing entrepreneur conversations and launch padding themselves faster. because I've seen some, not just your podcast, but in general, the Serbian American podcasts, Croatian American podcasts, and I was shocked at how many entrepreneurs there really are that come from Eastern Europe. And I was like, oh, it's the drive to not be broke. Yep, but that's elemental. Like I need to eat food.
Yeah, that's normal.
But what is it that gives so many Eastern European, and I'm not ignoring the rest, but this is for Eastern Europeans, right? Mostly the audience is mostly Eastern European. It's not the drive to survive. Like that may be the baseline basic instinct vibe, but I think it was the fact that we can take all those old crappy systems that wouldn't let you advance, and then you've got the know-how how that operates, how to work within the system, and then once you've given the freedom to actually operate within a capitalist system, of course it's an advantage. You know how to then use them to your benefit, greatly to your benefit. Not abuse them, but truly just have a launch pad. I think that's where the last couple of years of me visiting podcasts and talking to more entrepreneurs, I think that's the real commonality. How do you come from the worst of the worst systems, and communism is pretty damn bad, and then you come to a place like America, or any of the Five Eyes, right? Or, and you just make it, right? And so many entrepreneurs, especially down here in South Florida, everyone that was been on your podcast here and beyond, I know them. I've known them for years. They're all entrepreneurs, very successful, extremely well-known, and they all came from nothing.
Yeah.
They all came from the same goddamn garbage system that
I
we
think
all
that
came
was the
from.
American dream for them. That was like their idea. Even here, system supports you having a business. If you work for a job, you're paying the most taxes. If you have a business, they're more lenient. Government was more lenient towards you. So that's why people are like, okay, yeah, maybe that's also most of the people, it's money. That's just money, money, money. And then maybe you get the money, it's like, what's next? And then you're trying to think, but it's also money is the drive, especially if you grow up with not a lot of money, then it's kind of motivation. America is always like, people imagine, everyone imagines here, there's a tree outside with money, dollars hanging, you just go and pick how many you need, and that's it. But it doesn't work like that.
Who?
Well, most people in Serbia
Whose grandma thinks that? I don't believe that. I don't believe that it's that.
I
easy.
don't think it's just the younger generation, but older. I talked to my dad. He understands the truth. He knows everything. But even my friends' dads, I talk to them, and they understand it. But somehow in their mind, America is a dollar sign, and you need to have a lot of dollars if you're there. That's their mindset. They know but somehow they know America always resonated. Someone comes from America, back in the day. Someone comes from America, you come with a lot of money. No one came back to Yugoslavia, Serbia at that time. They was like, oh, he's broke in America. I never heard that. It's always coming, new clothes, new everything, new money, buying. It's always that maybe,
Yeah.
even let's say you get gifts from America at that time, you expect they buy you some cheap stuff with shirts, whatever, brand new, but you think that's amazing from your point of view. So I think that's just the perspective, and the movies, and of course the culture and stuff.
Again, I think we have this nurtured perception that America was for so long that much more wealthy, and it was. When I think of my grandfather, my father's uncle, who moved to the States first of the entire family in the 60s from Paris, lived in Paris, from Belgrade. And when I remember those things, when they would come back from the States, always the best dressed, always having a great taxi or Mercedes driving him around Belgrade. And I thought about back then, there was a significant difference between the quality of life and the wage gap compared to ex-Yugoslavia. Like my parents had 2 cars in the house in ex-Yugoslavia, right? Which was not really usual, but not really all that unusual, right? For successful, upwardly mobile people. But then I remember, my dad's uncle in America would have 3 cars. He'd have a Cadillac and a sports car and, and his own printing company and sign company. And I was like, well, that as a child left an imprint that there's just a lot more wealth in America. And then we compare prices today, right? You look at prices. We were talking about this before the podcast started, the recording started. You look at Belgrade. You look at the prices of real estate in Belgrade. Like what? You can literally buy a piece of real estate in Miami for half the cost that you can in Belgrade.
And I think you get more for money.
I think you get
more value for your money, for sure.
I believe that the quality of life, if we could compare 1 to 1, okay, let's start with quality of air. Forget quality of life, right? Like, hey, look at the air outside in Miami. You're like, that's tough to argue. And what $200,000 buys you in South Florida, and the big region of South Florida, for those who don't know, that's to us, we call that Miami-Dade Metro, but it's really 3 counties, but it's small, geographically small. What you can afford for $200,000 in South Florida is 10 times better than we can afford for $200,000 in Belgrade today. And so there's this incredible thing that's happening, that the American dream is not dead at all. It was never an American dream. It was the immigrants' dream to take advantage of the opportunities that Americans who were born and raised here simply could not see, because they weren't coming from a place of pain. We all came from a place of pain and hurt. I don't know of anybody, I don't care how wealthy they are, I don't care how wealthy they were, but the Balkans are a place of pain. And so when you come to the States, how often do you hear a happy story? You're like, oh, I was a multimillionaire, so now I live in Miami. And that's like a one in a
lot of thousands.
A lot of thousands, right?
So, yeah,
a lot, especially from Eastern Europe. I don't mean South America. You know,
but,
you hear.
but people usually always say running away from their parents or from something bad at home or running away from themselves, and that always catches up.
Yes.
You can't go anywhere, and then all the problems, you don't evolve. You bring all the stuff from back home, you bring it here. Mm-hmm. You think that something, America's going to change you. It might change you a little bit, but you still have to get yourself better.
But you also have to find yourself. But I think my truth, again, I've lived here for 33 years now in the U.S., and because of my close ties with Serbia, I believe that I'm a good enough judge, because I don't just sit in Belgrade, right? I'm the guy who goes to Pristina. I'm the guy who goes to all the neighboring countries, ex-U countries. I'm the guy who hangs out in villages. I happen to have a fairly innate ability to connect with people all around ex-Yugoslavia, and you can't tell me shit.
You've seen it.
We live in a place of pain in the Balkans. And one of the things that we have not done in the last 30 years is we haven't moved on past that. We keep holding on to old grudges and old issues. And I'm not saying we should forget them. We're simply not moving on. And then when you come to America, where you don't have to be on guard at all given times, right? If you move to South Florida or Waco, Texas, right, you can live a pretty comfortable life. No one's really bothering you. Am I right? Like, no one's really in your business. You just go about your way, and you can work and sort of be, if you choose to.
That's
no one's really on you. In Serbia, you lose your driver's license. You're good fucking luck getting a replacement. First, you got to get the birth certificate. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so asinine. You're like, it's administration for the sake. And I'm talking about losing a driver's license or an ID.
And that's what you said. I want to go back to that when you said it comes from a bad, sad place. Some things not all like that.
Yeah.
But some people bring that thing with you, bad experiences, bad stuff, whatever. And you can't just let it go. It's part of you. There's not all bad. There's some of this bad. I read something this week. I don't know where I saw it. It says sometimes the hardest burden to carry is the one you left behind.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like you think, I was like, it got me thinking. I'm like, who wrote this? I don't even know where I read it, but it's such a deep thing to think about. You think you're doing better, but if you're carrying stuff with you, still you're not getting better.
But that means as a human, it doesn't matter where you came from. You're not evolving as a human. If you just live in the past and that's the only tie you have to your humanity, then you've got nothing for the present or the future, right? And I think we've it's very comfortable back home to sit in this middle ground, right? To really just kind of float around through life. And I know it sounds weird. I don't mean meander. I mean just float. Just things are fine the way they are. Things can exist, and I have a decent job, or I don't, or my family helps me financially, or I don't, or I study till I'm 45, or I don't. But everything's kind of like accepted, right? But for those of us who came here in the 90s, there was a different U.S. back then than today, for sure. I think the U.S. was like, and here's the U.S. and good fucking luck. And, we gave you the freedom and a driver's license and your green card or whatever, passport. What do you want from us? Like, go, right? And I think it's different today, 30 years forward. Back then, people were just, the machine was grinding, right? Only today are we more aware of the different things that are from politics to ecology, and there's just all these like sort of fragmentations in the U.S. that's much more aware. Back then, people were like, "What do you get to work? What do you want? Like, I gave you a job,
a lot of people are starting here. I mean, they're coming, and I'm assuming you meet someone, first year, and I stay second or 10th year, and they still haven't figured it out. No. I guess they come to you and ask you, because you're successful, you have the businesses, you did a lot of different stuff. So what advice you give them?
The biggest advice is, did you come here to work or enjoy your life? Like, that's the first question back is, are you here to, especially in South Florida where we live, 80, 70% of people are here just to vacation, or they exist to vacation, right? And it's tough. You know what I mean by that?
I know.
It's
a tough balance.
It's a really weird balance, because you're like, we still got to work. I know there's the sun and the palms and the breeze, and you know what I mean? But we have to work to support the economy. So there's this perennial feeling in South Florida that's much different than all the U.S., in my opinion, at least. I've traveled to most of the states in the U.S. where people are out there grinding and hustling. Down here, people are like grinding and hustling, but let me just take a little break, and then let me take a little longer break. I think we have a feeling of much more vacation-y work here than anywhere else in the United States. But the first piece of advice, or is usually a question, but before the advice is, did you come to work or play, right? If you want to grind and hustle, my first piece of advice is diversify, right? Go work 3 jobs. If if you're single, if you don't have a family, try this business, hospitality, travel, the industry. Like, try different pieces, because you don't know what you're going to like, given especially South Florida or Florida in general's huge variety of industries, right? People forget we have agriculture, we have travel, we have hospitality, we have a ton of different industries, financial centers represented here. So depending on what your experience is, you can try different things. But if you're the FOB, fresh off the boat immigrant, you can get some really good paying jobs down here in South Florida that can point you in the right direction. As a matter of fact, some of your guests, not a lot of them, started out as doormen or bar women or bartenders, or then they worked their way up pretty fast into pretty successful young entrepreneurs. Shout out to everybody in South Florida. You know what I'm talking about. Where 10 years ago, they started off at ground level, and very quickly, in 10 years, through their own hustle and grind, became very well respected business people, men and women of South Florida, and definitely Serbia and the Balkans. And that is a hell of an achievement. And so shout out to everybody in South Florida. Not only it's been in your podcast, but just going up and down the streets, knowing who owns what and what they've done, how they got there. Those stories have been shared with me because I've been here again for 12 years. I have the sort of this innate, as you know, I own a digital marketing company, so I've crossed paths from everybody, from the lawyers to the bars to the, of all of our ex-Yugoslavian business people have somehow crossed their paths to ask questions, to give unsolicited advice. But that's a huge kudos to us. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for having started in that shithole of a country under that system that was great on borrowed money. Then that system collapses because all the money was due to the financiers, and we just didn't have any. We're like, we partied 6 times a year on vacation. We don't have money to pay for
But the
debt.
mentality still stays with a lot of people.
It stays, well, a lot, but I would say the last 5 years it's finally caught up. It feels like it's changed. It's no longer that lackadaisical, I'm going to go on 2 summer vacations. Not for everybody, but the mentality has changed, I believe. There's no more 2 trips for skiing, 10 days. I'm not saying it's perfect. I lose my shit when my Serbian employees go and then they disappear for 3 weeks on vacation. Again, well earned, because they bust their ass the rest of the year. I'm like, where are you going for 3 weeks? My favorite email to all my staff is, who approved this? Because I'm so used to the go mentality, right?
Is that about that work-life balance? You don't want to get overburned. In America, it's all about that. Everyone's saying you got to work hard. But you got to enjoy your life. And then people enjoying their life pointing finger at you because you're working too hard, and the people working hard pointing finger back, and you're like, there's no right or wrong. But here, I think, especially if immigrants starting from scratch, good luck. You got to work hard.
I don't believe you can come with nothing, start from nothing in America, and then afford the luxury of fucking off. I don't believe, but I believe the exact opposite. If you came, that's why I asked that question. Did you come to work or play? And it's a fair question if you're asking me for advice and you're fresh here. Because I get a lot of people that get pointed to, hey, go talk to Sasha in Miami when you land. Here's a cell phone. And my cell phone has been public for a decade plus. And so I always welcome people to ask, call, questions, text me. Social media, my followings on all the social media
What's
channels.
What's the most common couple of things they ask you, and they're like...
the number one thing is, where can I get a job the fastest? That's usually the number one question. Number 2, where can I stay that's the cheapest, right, but closest to my jobs? And 3, how do I get a car? It's the top 3 questions I get in 85% of cases. It's not high-level business advice. That's bullshit. Nobody walks around talking about, Sasha, tell me about the Google algorithm, how I rank my... that's just not a conversation you have, right? That's left over to my clients and future and potential clients. But
But it would be better if it gets to that level, more of those questions. Somehow, I think we don't. It's a lot of us, but a lot of people are successful. But it's still a small percentage versus how many people have potential to do it. But I think something is holding them back or not making the right decisions. Because I feel it. I feel a lot of people and then they get lost in chasing for money, chasing for this, figuring this out. That happens. So I think it needs to be converted a little bit more.
Here's my humble opinion on that, and that's because of my experience of having spent more time in Serbia than America for about 2.5, 3 years during the pandemic. There is I feel like I figured it out, right? Because how is it possible that in ex-Yugoslavia, and again, I'm not going to say just Serbia, but in Serbia in general, everybody has a tetkas media who knows how to build a website, do SEO, social media, AR, VR, chat, GPT, 3D rendering, video animations. How is it humanly possible that you don't need anyone's help? You can do it all, from the roof to the foundation, from painting your house to installing tile, changing the transmission of your car, to doing a brilliant e-commerce website tomorrow. You just can do it all. And that's everybody. When I say everybody, I mean 85. The amount of companies I met with, because I had the pleasure of being there physically on the ground, and I would meet with some pretty big, important companies that are significant revenues, 100 million euros plus a year, which is a lot for Serbia. And then they would come and ask to meet me because I did a lot of the podcast. I still do a lot of podcasts in Serbia, and so I wanted to give them knowledge of what I believe they should do to improve their business. And I don't want to lie, but in a period of 2020 to 2023, so 2.5 years, I probably met with 50 companies that are significant, have revenues, they can afford services, they can afford a team of 15 or 30 or 40 of my experts, met with me, all make sense. They see the gaps in the digital marketing plans, and they're using the old school mentality, and we're like, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then they go, send us a proposal and the price. We send the proposal and the price. Like, okay, it sounds great. And they're like, well, we'll let you know. You're like, well, let me know what? We identified the needs, the wants, blah, 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 the list. They're like, yeah, we'll do it ourselves. You're like, great. Then you fast forward to 2024, we look back, and every single one of those companies has done nothing. They've changed nothing. They've done nothing. And they all know better. It doesn't matter what the price point was. And so I figured it out. It's ego. It's pure, unadulterated ego. Americans. What does he know? What do they know? Why do we that bill? We should pay them that bill. I can't remember in my entire life history in America, anywhere in the globe, that I got on the roof, and when there's a roof leak, I shouldn't call a roofer. I'm going to figure this out today. Not ever. And so I attribute my success, on top of all those things that are elemental in every business, and support and loving family and all the cliches that are true in my world, I never was the smartest in the room when it came to a problem. To this day, if I have a roof leak, I am calling a roofer. I'm actually Googling to see who's not in the paid sponsored ads, and because, I know what those are, I'm going for the trust factors, right? In Serbia and ex-Yugoslavia, I found that, and I really mean ex-Yugoslavia, I dealt with Albanians and Bosnians and Croatians and Montenegrins or whatever that is. And then, I dealt with all these different nationalities, and I traveled the region. I would meet with them. I flew into Pristina and had a huge event where up and coming startups with young people, and then business people come and approach me, and I share information with everybody. And the same ego kept showing up. Very humble, forward-facing, oh my God, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. This is incredible information. Just to turn around and be like, no, or not call, or no. Is it the bruised ego? I feel like it's the bruised ego. I'm going to call it at your podcast first. I think there's an egotistical issue. And then that translates into here. So you come to the United States where the system relies on being integrated, intertwined, right? I don't keep hitting the microphone. But this is the system in the U.S., right? You're probably not going to do your roof and your transmission and your website and your SEO and PPC campaign and social media videography, editing, AI, and chat GPT, and do your own dental work to say, there's this reliance on an integrated system for those who have made it to this level. The gap is down here. The gap is elemental at accepting the fact that you cannot do everything. You're not allowed to do everything. No one's trying to act smarter than you. There are people who have walked the beaten path, who established the path In my world, I'm a pioneer in the Serbian American digital community in the marketing SEO space. I'm a pioneer. You should be able to come to me and ask me questions. But if I tell you and you ask me for a proposal and you can afford it because you're clearly a giant company, what in your hurt, bruised ego tells you? Maybe is it me? Because I'm not doing the work. I promise there's a whole team. So you don't have to like me at all. You should like me. I'm a likable guy. But is that what's holding you back? You think I'm wrong? 28 years of looking at Google code and before Google looking at Lycos code and keyword stuffing. You don't think I know better than you? What question do you think people can ask me?
And why does it matter if you know better?
And what is it? And well, if the ego is hurt and bruised,
I mean, if they know better than you, why are they listening to you in the first place?
it doesn't matter. That's fine. I'm glad. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I don't have an ego. People think I have an ego. I'm the one who deserved the ego if there was an ego measuring contest. But I don't have an ego. It's just laughable to me. I'm trying to help you advance your business.
That's cool that you actually went everywhere and you talked to everyone.
I did,
especially
a
the
lot.
business side, because business, I mean, whoever in the world doesn't know, business was not allowed in former Yugoslavia and Serbia until 30, 40 years ago. My grandpa opened he was making purses and belts and backpacks and he was selling, but the thing is, he was going to build a house, but he cannot get a loan. So he had to get a state job so he can apply for a loan for the house.
Yeah.
So you were not supported as a private business owner. So the whole system, people are relying on the government and different things. So business kind of new. So I guess we're still learning. I don't want to say I'm justifying whatever the opinion, but I think America has always been entrepreneurship business from the day one, I think.
Yeah, I think the ability to ask questions in America and get actual expert level feedback with good intentions, I feel is much better off. And it's not perfect. I'm not saying, oh, America's greater than. That's not the conversation, right? Before the comments on YouTube go crazy, that's a different conversation. If the ego could relax a little bit, I believe that Serbia and Balkans could advance much further. But as long as the Kasmina can do all those things and then cook a mean lunch, you know what I mean? Like how incredible is it that the Kasmina, like give me 6 of those, right? So I can do all that. With the army, but I believe that it's a bruised ego conversation.
And you can't even.
What does he know? Or what does she know?
You can't do 20 things perfectly. You're not an
Oh yes, you can.
I mean,
if you're from the Balkans, you could do 96 things perfectly, and then be ultimate expert. And then when you talk to an expert, you're gonna know better than that person. And then do it yourself.
You're spending time. Also, America has the call the guy, the culture. Every time you have a problem, you call the guy to fix it. But because you're focusing on your work, you have your job, you have your things going. But if I'm trying to figure something out for 10 hours, the guy can come in and fix it in an hour, pay $100, and I'm focused on my thing that I'm doing and make more money than whatever I lost that day. But trying to figure stuff out, it's the mentality. But I guess the lack of money maybe also, so you learn how to...
But is it really?
It maybe was. And that's kind of the mentality, I think it changes. I mean...
Well, here's what I do know from experience. After enough podcasts, talks, meetings, events, TED Talks, I don't even know what I've done in the last 30 years. But here's the one thing I've learned is that in America, we as immigrants learned the most important part, which is economies of scale as it relates to our business, not personal life. But economies, what you just said, that's economies of scale. What does that mean? That means that if I can pay somebody for $100 an hour to get this job done, I can do something else in that 1 hour and I can earn 300 and then I scale that. Or if I can resell this microphone, I can buy it for 50, but I can resell it for 100 Amazon by just opening a business license. And then I got to market it. So I got to spend $10 per acquisition to buy it. And all of a sudden now economies of scale. So now in order to sell 10, I just got to put in 10 times 10, but it's still the same percentage margin. That means I can go turn it up to 1,000. I can now sell 1,000 of these microphones. And oh my God, economies of scale and human capacity, capital, the financial capital, and time. And if that is mastered by business people in the Balkans, then the efficiency model changes drastically. Revenues change drastically. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe I'm just too capitalistic looking at it. But that problem, when the immigrants come here, no one teaches them economies of scale. You can't scale yourself. There's only X amount of hours in the day that you can work. It doesn't matter. You can work 19 jobs, but if you can't be up for 96 hours at least.
How do you get some guidance? America is all about mentorship. You got a podcast, but how should you just take on issue? Let me get a mentor. Let me get someone to ask questions. Let me find someone to help me out.
Social media. Turn to people that you know.
But it's hard. It's so much stuff, and you go in. It's so
I
much.
don't mean like just random influencers. I mean, we have churches, we have restaurants. You can ask and educate yourself. You shouldn't go talk to everybody. You should talk to people who are in your sphere of influence. And you know, if it's to believe there's three circles of influence, you know, you should talk to your immediate circle. And if they're all dumb, then go to your second. And then if then your third circle is dumb, you need a new circle. You know,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
need
also.
to,
I
need to
also.
go to a library.
Yeah, I also think it's short versus long term. We're not used to thinking long term. All of us. We don't know how to say, okay, let me work on this today, and in 5 years I'll reap the benefits from this. We all want it now, in a year, 6 months. So no one's ready to wait. I think that's a big problem with us.
I don't think it's just us though. You know, that's unfair to say it's just Serbian Americans or you know.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
I don't believe. I think it's the time. The perception is no longer reality. And that's a big problem, right? Perception used to be you work X amount of hours, you go to you know, you get retirement pay and you retire in Costa Rica and you live a beautiful life, and then all of a sudden you realize that you have to retire in Costa Rica because your $1,200 a month pay after you worked 47 years is not enough to live in Wichita, Kansas anymore, right? Maybe in Manhattan, Kansas, but not in Wichita, Kansas. You're like, oh my God, I gotta live out in the sticks, and even that it's a trailer, not a house. You know, so we're now reaching a different thing where the financial rewards are no longer matching that level of input. But it all comes back to your mentor. And I don't mean mentor like formal mentor. Who do you talk to every single day? If you want to be the best trucker, should you hang out with best doctors in the world? No. And as that sounds excellent, if you want to grow within that industry or niche, you want to improve your life, you're probably going to get the best advice from fellow truckers, right? And it doesn't matter what you believe in or want, but you're going to impart that knowledge to help you grow and that expertise you grow. Same with different. If you're a dentist in Chicago, you should probably learn from the best dentist. You probably shouldn't hang out with somebody who replaces tires for a living every day, and that's their input of life. I'm not saying be exclusive, but I'm saying that's how you learn. So mentorship can come from church, from events, from places, from social media, and find the people. And I'm not sure how other people do it, but I can tell you, and my followers can probably nod across all the social media channels. I have like 40,000 followers across all my social media channels, maybe 50,000 total, and LinkedIn and X and all this stuff. But I don't think I've ever not responded to a text message or social media post like, "Hey, I've got a question," blah blah blah. I may not have time for everybody to give them life advice, but I've never like turned down
Specific.
a question.
You can't just like answer general questions.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I've taken time to listen to people's pitches. I used to get them all the time. 22 was a wild year for me. I was in like cold pitches, like we have a business idea. I was like, oh damn, how many people have business ideas? Who's gonna work to provide the work behind the business? But it was an interesting time. I think people had a lot of free time.
And also ideas. I think we're big on ideas, but just pouncing on that idea, just doing the work, it's somehow maybe I had a lot of good ideas, but I was like, oh, and then, and then another one, and just ideas and ideas. I
I have great ideas every day when I light my cigar on my patio, right? It's just not enough. You can have all the inspiration in the world. You have to see it through from idea stage to execution stage, and there's so many gaps. How to get there, the steps that are well defined of how to get there, and any attempt at shortcutting never works. And that's not, again, I'm going to try not to be as cliche as possible. This is a very important podcast for me because I think there's been a lot of that cliche advice stuff. But I mean, when I say no shortcutting, there's only ways to learn faster, to make better use of your time, to learn how to scale yourself while you sleep. Those things you need marketing partners and product partners, and you've got to be able to rely on your intertwined system. And the amount of inefficiencies that I see in companies across the globe, from my own clients to my own business partners, to when I see inefficiencies, it makes me cringe because I know it takes a little bit of couple of flips to make something better or incrementally better. And so my advice usually relegates to time, how to make best use of time. And I've helped a lot of people with credit scoring, who to turn to, how to get a credit score, how to maintain a perfect credit score. I spent years researching this stuff. I used to obsess over the 850 credit score. I did. And I reached 816 until I realized it makes no difference whether I have 740 or 8. Like nobody treated me different, but I obsessed with learning of it. great friend of mine, Anthony Vanaki, was a mentor of mine. I reached out to him on social media. Said, "I love what you say. I just don't know anything about this. I need to learn." And I'm 30 some years old. So I think people are more receptive when you tell them you don't know and you need some help and you'd like some guidance, right?
Yeah, you come off too hard. You're like, oh yeah, I know this, and no one wants to talk to you.
But do you really? I mean, I haven't, at least in South Florida, but even in Serbia, maybe even in Phoenix, where I grew up, I've never run into Serbs who don't ask for help. Have you? Like,
No, they do ask for, but are you? It's like they listen to you, but when they need to use that advice,
some have.
some it's like, it sounds like it's too difficult. Okay, it sounds great, amazing. Then I go to sleep. I wake up tomorrow. It just kind of goes away a lot.
I don't know. I can't say that's the truth or not truth, but
We're not generalizing, but
I have met some people who have taken really good advice, and I've also met some people who haven't taken any of the advice. And it's interesting to compare the two sides of where I know for a fact they did not listen and they asked for specific advice, or they took somebody else's advice and didn't listen to mine. Not that I'm an all-knowing. That's not where we're going, but. If you're going to take advice about a subject from a subject matter expert, shut the fuck up and listen, because you're asking a subject matter expert. How can you identify a subject matter expert? It takes like 4 Google checks and 3 clicks and 2 phone calls to know that you're talking to a subject matter expert. And the same allegory always talks about the roofer, right? You know how he holds the hammer. You know if you're talking to an expert roofer, or right. So
you know that, yeah.
I think you need to learn how to shut the fuck up. We don't know how to shut the fuck up. The Balkans are interesting because part of that ego trip we talked about earlier. Again, not stereotyping, generalizing, but it's a general sentiment. The majority of people just know everything about everything, right? And have an input at everything. It's not humanly possible. It's not possible. Otherwise, we would be the smartest nation in the world with the smartest, output and the, everything.
Which we're not, definitely, but no.
But it's not. It's not humanly possible. It's not normal to have a nation of know-it-alls. What the fuck does that get? How did we get here if that was the case? If you knew better, you'd done better, and if you know better, you would do better, and we don't. And so I don't mean across the globe, but I'm saying in general. We wouldn't be where we are if we knew better. And I don't mean just Serbia again. I'm not shitting on Serbia, but it's, I'm Serbian. So I'm allowed to say that because I'm being honest and people are refusing to be honest.
And you're part of all of that.
I'm a daily part of that. I invest in Serbia every single day. I have employees and staff and family and real estate. I did all that. Like, you can't tell me shit because I've been through all that. And so people try to give me advice. I'm like, what the fuck? What are you, I'm not trying to be egotistical, even though I should be. But who are you talking to? Guy works for a foreign company as a GM making $5,000 a month, euros in Belgrade, trying to tell me shit. I was like, go try your own company. Lose a couple $1 million investing in a bad staff, a shitty humans.
Yeah, I was going to connect with that because you had so many companies and
I've closed so many companies.
That's what I was going to ask you.
I've done this my entire life. This is not like Sasha had this incredible, amazing success story, bro. I had to eat shit for 10 times before I learned what scale is, what wealth is. Today I know what wealth is, but the amount of times I came to the edge of existence to look down, if it wasn't for my best friends or my business partners, my family to support me, but I didn't get to that edge because I was a jerk. I went to that edge because I was learning and I was figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Right? See, I didn't go at it negatively. But I didn't know. And when I asked, I listened. Even with advice, it still doesn't make that a success story, right? And it's very interesting because, to me, those edge moments is what built me to be successful today. And I don't really take a lot of credit. If you've heard my other podcasts, I talk about my team a lot, my staff, my business partners, my best friend, my wife. Like, I talk a lot about that support mechanism. I try not to take all this credit. But you can't tell me shit. I've been in 9 different industries in Europe, in the Balkans, not Europe, just in the Balkans, ex-Yugoslavia, and 27 in the States. And I've closed many, I've sold many, I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars of Series A, pre-seed, seed money. I've been through rounds of utter failure and huge success. And I have companies valued from $5 million to $50 million to $90 million today, valued by financial institutions in the U.S. and global. And I've got companies who are utter fucking failures who just cannot get up off the ground. Doesn't matter
Let's
what
say
we do.
you got a good business idea and you work and you think, okay, that's it. I want to pursue this, and it's kind of working out. But then, and in a year or two, it doesn't work out. And how do you like release that? You're holding on it super hard.
Yeah,
How do you just say,
that
okay,
is-
maybe it's time to lose some money? I lost my time. I lost a couple of years. How to get over that? Because it's difficult to just let me start something new and start from scratch.
That probably be the worst thing about me. A lot of my business partners like, that's not working, cut it. My best friend James and I often talk about James on these podcasts and interviews, but he's a lot more methodical. He's like, it's not working out, cut it, move the fuck. Like, he's different, but he's a second generation Chinese, Norwegian American. He's got a different mentality.
Wow,
We
that's
grew up in a-
that's
yeah, I know.
right there.
Yeah, he looks like a Chinese Norwegian. What's up, James? But people have different perception of how long something should be applied for. And then I've got the other stories where everybody told me, stop doing it. It's not going to work. It's failing, right? And then I just felt something didn't feel like I should quit on it. And I kept pushing and pushing it. But there was companies that was sabotaged, former partners, business investors, takeover attempts. I've been through it all. You can't tell me shit because I've done this the entire life. But I keep evolving and learning through every single process. But the difference is there are times everybody around me is like, Sasha, just give it up, bro. It's not working out. I'm like, no, I can feel it, right? And all of a sudden, there's this tiny little just flame. It just goes, psh, and somebody pays attention. They go, oh, hey, you know what? It's the colors that suck on your product. Try changing colors. You change the colors, you're like, oh, it was the colors the whole time. It was something so stupid. Nobody else noticed. Everybody else said this product sucks and won't sell or whatever. And took that one person to go, but why is that the color of something negative? You go, oh, damn, I didn't. Really? Great product, but the look of it's kind of weird, right? These little things, it's time in the market that you can't time the market. It's time in the market, right? And then there's other times that's the exact opposite, where everybody's like, dude, this is the best thing ever, Sasha. And I'm like, this is the worst idea of ever. We need to tank this company yesterday, right? And so it's a feeling. I don't think it's precise math, right? Because the elements are different, timing's different. But that's the one thing I've never done. I've never tried to time the market for any of my companies. If it felt right and it felt like we can do this and the data analytics prove that there's enough interest of it and we know we can have the marketing to it, it was probably we're going to get it done. Right? We're going to try it. And then sometimes we just had, as a corporation and me as the leading partner, and I have a lot of business partners in my different companies, but I'm fairly well trusted as the president of the holding corp. They trust me. Sometimes less, sometimes more, because sometimes I'd make these massive, decisions that are, but I'm kidding, obviously, but they trust the process of entrepreneurship. And that's what I appreciate about my business partners. They hang on, right? They go, okay, he's crazy, but he's doing it, right? And so let's try it. There's companies now that are now rebuild number 3. And now at this point in time, I stopped calling the investors for money. I say, I got it. It's out of my pocket. Now I'm just pissed because I'm like, why is this not working? We will do this one way or another because it makes sense. And so the stubbornness doesn't come from a place of pain. That comes from the fact that you've got something incredible. You just got to put that little thing, whatever's missing. And so, yeah, I look at all of my companies in 10, 20, 30-year plans. Every single company that I have in step, in process, in design, development has a 10, 20, 30-year plan. And that means that they are either built to scale for the 10 years, for the next 20 years, the next 30 years. Doesn't mean I want to hold on to them. And matter of fact, within that 10, 20, 30-year plan, it fits into my short, medium, and long-term investment strategy as it has my entire life. I could be cash poor 1 year, but my assets could be massive, right? Because I've bought and reinvested a lot of money from the proceeds from the previous year and followed the tax. So it's the dynamism that makes you an entrepreneur. It's the fact that you could swim up and down, left and right when shit hits the fan. The easiest thing in the world is to say is, Sasha, we're done, folks. It sucked. We gave it our all. Good job, everybody, and walk away. And we've seen that now happening year in, year out. Companies raise a lot of money and have no revenue, and they're the best hoorah in the world. And the easiest thing is say, drop the mic and walk out. Be like, haha, I got you, suckers.
How do you see the good investments? Let's say if someone is not a entrepreneur for 20 years, he's just starting out, and or someone who's like having a normal job. Let's go back to majority of people, because majority of people are not entrepreneurs.
True.
So, some people are like stuck in their jobs and they want to try to make some investments. What do you think people should be doing and they're not doing? Because a lot of people are not investing, working, spending money. What do you think everyone should do?
Well, there is one piece of advice that I go back to that I failed to take in when I was 19 years old, or going into 20. And it was about real estate, and I did not take advantage of that advice, and I fucked up royally for not taking that advice. I can't fathom where my personal and corporate wealth would be today had I just listened to Mr. Greg Burkle, may God rest his soul, because he gave me an incredible piece of advice that would have set me on a much different path, I think. Again, I'm not going back, but I'm just reflecting.
Yeah, of course.
He said to me, you're a young man, you're in college, you can afford to buy a property because you make good money from your business. What you should do is go buy a fourplex. Live in one, rent out the other three. It's not going to look fancy, but you don't need fancy. You're not home. You're either in your business or at a club with your friends, with your car activities. And I was like, oh, what does Greg know? In retrospect, I was a moron at 19, right? Because you're 19, right? You don't really take advice. But his advice was very well natured. But what he passed away, what I didn't realize is that Greg owned something like 18,000 residential property units, right? He died a quadrillionaire of old age. But I had a mentor without even understanding that he was trying to give me the best advice possible. For the 150,000 or 163,000 that I paid for my first house way back when in 99, for that money, I could have bought four fourplexes. That's 16 residential units, right? And so I didn't take that advice. So back to your original, I'm just giving you where my advice comes from. And my advice was, I've got to be able, this is my advice, people ask me for investment, is short-term, medium, and long-term. Also, no risk. When I say no risk, there's no such thing as no risk for investment. But minimal risk, medium risk, and high risk. And then most importantly is all that money is money you're willing to throw away. Everything I invest in is money that I did not plan on surviving. And the times I went over the edge is because I invested more than I was comfortable in literally lighting on fire.
And you get too emotional with it because
and you get too emotional. That's a great piece of advice. When I got emotional is when I got in over my head, right? And so only as I got older did I realize if I have $100 in my pocket, who's forcing you to invest all 100? Invest 20 if you're comfortable losing all 20, or 50 if you're comfortable. But don't go back. Don't take backies. Be prepared to lose the 50. Now, if you're put in your last 100 and you're willing to lose all 100, you're probably the betting type. I don't bet. I don't do any gambling. As you know, I don't smoke. I don't drink. I ban cigars, but not cigarettes. I read I have a pretty straight edge life these days, right? Kids and family and businesses. And that focus in the last couple of years has now turned me into a pretty sharp observer, of things. And because I get up so early in the morning, I catch the day before the day starts. And so what I've learned is that most people are not investing, they're betting. And I was like, wait, what? Like I started absorbing this last couple of years because of my previous transgressions where I got all emotional about a deal or event. I was like, man, it's math. It's basic math. And being able to diversify, I realized that I've got to have my hands in many different pots because it's no different than entrepreneur life. I may find one business attractive or 10 or 50. Well, why can't I be a part of all 50? Same thing with investments and stock and portfolio and startups. And you know how I acquire startups. And some companies come to me and go, I don't know what I'm doing. Just take over and we'll give you 50%. Or we know exactly what we're doing. We just need that magic. We'll give you 5% ownership of the company. You guys do your thing. And so it doesn't matter. When I say invest, it doesn't have to be just $1 for a X investment, but real estate and land and gold and silver and crypto and anything that's investable.
Diversify.
You should diversify. The only thing I do not invest and never have invested is stocks. I got screwed pretty badly on my own stock many, many years ago because I didn't understand the game of stocks and hostile takeover. And that's a pretty public information game. But, I entrusted the stock of my company going public to less than trustworthy, knowledgeable people, right? And I lost my ass on that back in 2004. And so I said, never again, right? I will never invest in stocks. That's my thing. That's a thing for me. And again, it comes from a pain point, but I don't invest in stocks. I'll rather invest 25 grand into a company X, 50 grand, long-term, short-term debt notes, convertible debt notes, things that, again, I'm not willing to cry over if I lose it. But just putting it in the system that all of a sudden just goes bloop with no explanation. It's not like the sales went down in this company. There's no logic to me behind it. And as such, I don't invest in stocks. But
You
I'd
got to
rather
educate
invest.
yourself, whatever you're doing. That's the
Well, I
number
mean,
one
what's the
thing.
what's the right or wrong advice? You know what I mean? Again, as long as there's that principled approach, and frankly, I sort of feel like I know better, not about everything, but I feel like if you give me $100, I can probably turn it into 200. Time is, of course, a question, but I see a path of how to multiply wealth, but mostly from a long-term strategic thing. I'm not. When I was 16, I was a light bulb flipper, right? Started selling light bulbs. And that's how you heard about my story, right? I was an automotive pioneer online, but I was really flipping light bulbs out of the trunk of my car. We all were, my partners and I. But so what? So is light bulbs. So that's how I started. That's what I knew as a 15-year-old.
And you're learning on the way. Every single day, every business,
Yeah.
it's a learning curve for our next one.
But I had to put in a lot of money to make a lot of money. I had to start with one to get to 100,000, right? To get to container loads from China. And that took time and blah, 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 blah. So I don't think there's somebody who's like, I have the definitive, because everybody's looking for shortcuts. I don't. I'm always like the long-term. Yes, you have to have cash flow to eat and live. That's why I keep saying the strategy has to be threefold. And I've followed a lot of different incredible people who manage people's wealth, and God bless them all. That's fantastic. I have a financial advisor, and he's incredible. He's on TV all the time, and him and I speak a lot. He's helped me through the years understand the bigger picture, but he's not my mentor. He's still like, you got to make your own decisions, bro. Like, what are you, what are you doing? And I love to create. And so to me, creating a business is a lot more valuable, and having my best friends and long-term partners sit with me, and things don't go right, and we got to figure out how to fix them. And, I like that. I like the drive of the development of the business. When we sell off the company, yeah, well, okay, we made money or we lost, whatever. Okay, yes, and it sounds pretentious, but it really is not the end goal. And it stopped being the end goal the moment I stopped being hungry. You know what I mean? Like, physically hungry. I mean, literally hungry. Like, when I had food to eat, I was like, hey, we're not broke anymore, right? So, we've moved on. But now the strategy is long-term sustainable growth and development, right? Because it's a line. You draw a line. Doesn't matter if it does this. Normalized curves are supposed to go look like this for growth, right? And your costs are reduced, but so there's this growth pattern I've noticed since I turned about 40. It's about 5 years ago. I've realized there's a whole different strategy. I'll be the first guy to call up my partner investor, be like, fuck off, leave your money here because we're doing something amazing here. Like, I'll be the first one. Then I'll also be the first one and say, this is tanking, get out. And usually they're like, no, I don't care, whatever, man. It's money that I put in. Well, it's $5,000 or 500 grand. I did it because I believe in the project. Goodbye. Like, I like that support I have dynamic because I always lead with my own money. Every project is led by my own money, followed closely by my best friend, James, who's in not everything, but, who's always like, let's go, whatever. We got money, light it on fire, let's go, right? So, like, that go-to thing, it drives my entrepreneur spirit, right? I don't have a lot of that, ooh, should be careful, and I don't have the clenched jaw or business. You never see
But
me
that's entrepreneurship spirit, because a lot of, most people, again, are not entrepreneurs. And there's a thing, liking what you do. You like what you do. That's
I
why
love what I do.
That's why you're successful, because of that.
I love what I do.
Most people want to be entrepreneurs, but they don't have it in them. And it looks cool, and it looks, I gotta have money, but deep inside they know they want to do something else.
Yeah.
So not everyone's that. So you have to what's your advice to them also? Because I know America is a problem, is enticing with the money, and you're like, okay, I want to live life like this, but that requires a lot of my time. So I'm not gonna be able to do what I want to do, but I have to do this because I like living like this. So it's kind of always that how do you manage your time? You have so many companies. You're like, okay, he's great, he's making a lot of money, he's doing all that. But what is he time for himself? What is he doing? How do he has time for the family?
Again, economies of scale. I have a calendar that functions, and people in my company and those who follow me, my business partners watching this, they're all doing this right now. If I was to show you my phone last week, I don't know what happened, but my calendar started at 4 a.m., project management team meetings, and I'm on those meetings in Serbia or Norway, or and it lasted till 11, 12 p.m. And so how do you scale that? There's just times it just is too chaotic. But the problem for me is I don't see it as work. Like, I'm psychotic like that. I don't see any of this as work. And I don't mean like cliche. People that know me, they know my nickname. I live for digital marketing. I live for real estate development. I live for business development. I live for anything innovative in fintech, martech, sport tech, edutech. I live for this stuff. This is my life. I don't get up and go like, I gotta go to work today. I have a multitude of offices in South Florida, spanning from Boca to downtown Miami. You know that, in my different companies. It's my pleasure to get in my car. Maybe not the traffic to get there, but I'm excited about visiting my offices and teams and staff and meeting clients. Like I can't keep even when it was the darkest and the dumbest and the worst financial situation in any of those companies. The moment I stopped being excited, it's over for that company. Or
Yeah,
me
that's
as part of that company, right? There are companies that I've surrendered to CEO. When I say surrendered, I've walked away from because I'm disgusted by how they're run, or I don't really like the people anymore, or my vision's no longer the same. Because I'm not a control freak, believe it or not. I do have to impart my teams that I rely on so greatly every day and trust them. I can micromanage to a fault, but there's companies I walked away from and I was like, boo, this sucks. This is lame for me. I find no joy in doing this, right? Then that's when I draw my line and say enough, right? But back to the initial investment, it all goes back to diversification. I am not bored. I cannot be bored when every hour in my calendar, every single day, 7 days a week, there's some sort of a different thing happening for a different entity.
That's because you love it and you have a plan. But what's the general plan? You have an idea, okay, where do you see yourself 5, 10 years? What would not end goal be, but you have some things in mind.
I have the goal, and that's to be a serial entrepreneur till I die. Like I want my kids, my 2 kids that are now out and about, and my future son. Like I have a vision for my family and my best friend and his family and my other best friend and their family. Like I have a vision of an entrepreneur culture as not like this like weird grimy grindy thing. No, just elevating and helping globally with my companies, because I think my companies are all game changers. Some to a lesser degree, some to a novel idea, but they're all game changers and they're all right. They weren't built to be cash cows. They weren't built to be cash anything. They were meant to be game changers. They were built because I felt they could be a game changer. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done them.
It's meaningful.
Yeah. And I want my kids and my best friends' kids and my other best friends' kids and their families and my employees. We celebrate every employee's childbirth as the baby of company X. Did you know? You don't know that. Why? Because to me, that came from love and the energy we transfer. Like, is it perfect in every company every day? No, it's not possible. But damn, do we give effort to celebrate the life of that child being born because their parent or parents, in many cases, work for one of my companies or many of my companies, depending on who you ask. So I want to be a forever serial entrepreneur. I never want to go fishing. I never want to go hunting. I never want to go skiing. I don't give a flying fuck about any of that stuff. I live where I love South Florida. I love the heat, the sweat, the humidity, the mosquito. I love all that. That's my life. I love the sun.
That should be the goal for everyone to
I
find
want my
something
kids
like
to learn what they love and not just be part of my entrepreneur circle, but have an actual system that involves many entrepreneurs and many self-powered. And I think the number one reliance on people is that they don't have to be an entrepreneur. You said that yourself. Most people are not entrepreneurs. But even in my employees, I ask them to treat my company as their own, to be an entrepreneur mindset. And so ideally, my only goal is just keep working and hustling and bringing innovation to the world. And then hopefully, if the marketplace takes, that means I'll be rewarded with money for a job well done. It's not I need the money or I will make the money. It's also staggering to ignore the fact that some of these companies, because they are game changers in the next 5 years, they will be huge game changers. Some are just not. Some are there designed to keep the cash flow going and be part of the lab system and then the ecosystem. Not everything can be a huge innovation. Sometimes we just need to grind to get things done, and we do it better inside than most others. But it doesn't mean that my plan is different, And so I lie to my best friend all the time. Like, James, I'm going to retire and get on my boat and blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, okay, right. Right. And to my wife, oh, we're going to retire and sell these companies and disappear. And she's like, yeah, okay, right. Like I would go insane doing that. But I do find a pretty good balance of how to spend time with my children. And it's a lot of fun, and my wife and my family. And I spend a lot. Anybody who follows me on social media knows that every free second is spent with the kids or with a cigar in my mouth. Like, that's my family and my, so we spend a lot of time, investing a lot of time My wife holds it down incredibly, and she's sort of like the organizer of all this chaos of life. But it's fun, and if it was not at all instances, there's a lot of bad days being an entrepreneur. But in
That's
general,
life
I
in general.
don't want to change that. If I lose that, then I'm done. I'm done as a human. Like my drive comes from the fact to be able to hop on a plane tomorrow. I'm in Belgrade, the next morning, and I'm out meeting people. And then if I have to be out in 2 days, I pack up right back through Istanbul, back into Miami or whatever. Because
That's great.
that's what drives me. That's my life. I wanted that. I wanted that when I was 8 years old in the blocks selling, magazines. Like that's what I used to do to make money. I made gum money to buy bubble gum by taking my parents' old magazines and selling them, or kids' magazines called strips in Serbia, stripovi, and sell them on a mat when it was nice weather in my blocks. That's what I used to do. I was 8 years old by myself. I used to hop on 3 buses, and this is a true story, to take accordion classes. I loved accordion music so much, right? I did that on my volition. Nobody forced me to do it. I was 8 years old. My parents tell the story proudly. And they've been interviewed a couple times in the U.S., Serbian newspapers in the U.S., and it's an amazing thing. I did that. I do that. That's me. That's how I came from that to this, because that's what I love. I can't sit on a beach for 7 days and be like, oh, this is great. Woo, sand, woo. Do I like to see it? Yes. Do I like to travel and experience new cuisines? And I love all that. But just to sit there and be like, oh, it's the sunshine.
So, majority of people would like to do that. But
I can't fathom.
So-
I can't even. My brain doesn't comprehend. Like Sasha can't think of Sasha just sitting on the beach like, well, there's a nice little water here. Like it's just not me.
So
right?
they heard your story there right now. Whoever wants to get in touch with you to ask you about hit you up, because you always said you always respond, or to follow
Always.
you, whatever advice, whatever's happening in your life, where they can find you.
Oh, you can first of all Google my name, which gives you everything. I actually added added my nickname as my middle name. I got so tired of being confused with different commonly known names. But Aleksandar Sasha Jovicic on Instagram. You can find me as the God of SEO, TheGodof SEO, not CEO. I'm the God of SEO. And at Give It Up for Sasha. So I have 2 profiles. And then on X, at Sasha with a SH, Sasha Jovicic, Jovicac. That's my new account after getting banned for the 3rd time for having a big mouth. On LinkedIn, Aleksandar, Aleksandar, Sasha Jovicic, Jovicac. Google my company, Executive Digital Holding Group. You can find me on what else? X and YouTube.
I'll put the links to it.
Yes, yeah, I can bore people to death. But the most important part is I always tell people, every podcast, you've heard me say the same thing if you listened. Just call and text me. I don't know that you need help if you don't need help. I'm not here charity. There's nothing that you can't ask me about my industries that won't be told to you very openly, right? And I hope I have served and paid it forward with all the cliches to many of your audience listeners, especially in South Florida. I have been the first patron of many bars, clubs, restaurants owned by Serbs and Balkans here. And I've had the pleasure of participating in the activations and being that first generation American that's participating in both balancing acts here and back home, right? Which is the tough balancing act. So
that's amazing. I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. And thanks again for coming out. And hopefully there was so many stories. I have a lot of things we'll touch upon, but the thing is, I don't want to expand it too much. We can always sit back, and it's America. I mean, you have so much experience living here for so many years. We can talk about so many different subjects. They decided to focus on this. So thanks everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe.
thanks for having me. See ya.